You know, what happens to that data? And you know, if you try to remotely wipe remotely wipe the corporate data of that device, what happens if you by accident delete some of the consumer's photographs and so forth as well? So I'd say technically, I think we can answer that question, and I think you'll start to see solutions come out. But I think more of a challenge that we'll face is, what do we do if? And what do we do if that's a consumer device? Or what do we do if, for example, we delete some of their personal data? I think those are probably some of the more pressing questions that we have. Because technically, I think we have the answers.
Okay, Anne-Marie, do you have some?
So I think obviously from an application and a services perspective, I think obviously it's the applications that light up any device, whatever type of device. So I think what is interesting, and I've just lost my train of thought, it's catching.
I'm glad it's catching.
Is that, what was a very good point that I wanted to share there, is that, oh yes, so, and actually as part of some of the work that we're currently doing at the moment, it's similar to everybody here. In Microsoft, we've got, I think it's 1,753 LOB applications that's used around the world. And how do we take the applications that people are using, you know, that are for their daily work in different ways and different roles, and enable those and how on these different devices. So I think obviously for new application development, and you know, in Microsoft, because there's lots of technical people who, you know, are very passionate about developing different types of applications. You know, it's easier looking at the newer applications, and some of the things that we, you know, and the guidelines that we provide is around HTML5. That should be one of the key things that for any future development, thinking about HTML5, thinking about the cloud, how do you leverage the cloud and all of the cloud assets, etc. But I think the bigger challenge that Microsoft faces, as I think most people will do, is about what do we do with a lot of the existing applications that our users do need to access that currently haven't been architected for you know, for the whole variety of devices, and that's a journey that we're on at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say just very quickly. I mean, in the last couple of years, we've been implementing effectively an IBM equivalent of a business app store. Now, I'm not sure that's got our own applications that are being driven to be used on, you know, multiple devices, and it sort of has a good view of what they're available on. But it doesn't answer everything, and it doesn't answer the, you know, I like this one's great, how do we bring that into the fold? It has some recommendations as well, so that aren't necessarily ones that we own, but it says, you know, we've tested this and these are fine, sort of thing, you know, that are open on, you know, in the external market. But I don't think we've fixed 100%, you know, how we control that, especially when people are really driving it from a productivity point of view.
Okay. Time for a last question, I think, if there is one.
Hi, Alex Badlin from UBS Innovation Team. What's your view on when do you actually require a corporate device and when do you not require a corporate device? And to give you an example, if you're a support person, is the company going to say, you know what, you have to buy your own clothes, so you bring your own device to do this job? Or do you think if it's part of your job requirement to be accessible and mobile, then the company should provide a corporate device? Love your views on that. Thank you.
Dave?
So this brings back flashes in my management meetings of just giving home broadband to people and things. So which is an analogy in a way, which is the same thing. I think that the support staff piece is what triggers that. Which so you know, in most cases these days, people have their own broadband, and you know, the days of providing the classic piece of the corporately provided network is probably not as fast as they can get where they want to be anyway. You know, we're not going to provide the 50 meg broadband as part of a corporate piece, but they want it for their own purposes. For support people, then what we're finding, so the support organisation is one area where I look at and say, we do. And the reason we do, and I'll use the broadband as an example, the same thing would extend to the device though. We do because as a business, I can get business SLAs from the broadband provider. As a consumer, that cannot. So if it's important to me that they're actually available 24/7 and capable of operating, I need to have an SLA that backs up the services that they need to access. So in that sense, if it was around specific devices that we would support or specific applications they need to access, then we would for that. For a large chunk of the workforce, they don't have necessarily those requirements. So if I was to take the support team and say that's one thing, and look at a sales team and say, well, that's different. In the sales team, they probably want choice, they want a different kind of roaming ability. They're interacting with different people all the time with different requirements. There might be different ways to interact with their clients. So I see them as slightly different. But on the support side, that's an area that we do actually put in specific infrastructure for, and it's the business SLA that drives it.
Stefan?
Well, there's specific services that you can only access if you got the right certificate on this laptop or desktop, and if you're remote, you got to have the VPN software installed. So give you examples. That's HR stuff. I mean, as a manager, got to manage a self-service, performance management. But it's as well if I want to access, which I don't do because I'm not a developer. If I want to access code or data center resources, I need to have the appropriate certificates and the appropriate software installed, and that only happens on a corporate device. But other than that, I mean, sales or even support could do their job anywhere if they don't have access or need critical, applications that need to be protected.
Okay, thank you.
So, and I think just from a Microsoft perspective, so we classified the standard devices and non-standard, and we are continuing to provide our staff with standard devices, but they have a choice of different standard devices, some more consumer-like, some more, on the ruggedized, etc. But I think the key thing is for us is, going back to productivity and depending on the role, if they want to have access to the corporate data when they're, off-site, etc., a key prerequisite for us is really a device that has a TPM chip. So, and because by policy, all devices are a bit lockered, so from a security perspective. So, but for example, if there's a BYO device, because a lot of the consumer devices now have got the TPM chip, if a staff member decides to have their own device, if it has TPM chip, and we can obviously manage it for access into the main and the BitLocker on it, So at the moment, we are still providing devices, but we're seeing more people now, and we're supporting both really at this stage.
Okay, Rash, brief word.
I mean, I think ultimately it comes down to risk, and how much risk are you willing to tolerate? And ultimately, you can determine the value of the service or the data that they want access to. And the best example I always use about this is, usernames and passwords are predominantly the main sort of de facto level of authentication used for pretty much everything today. But actually, if we have access to intellectual property, well, actually, you know what? Then you need to have a corporate device because the value of the data is so much. And that then means that, you have a TPM chip. That means actually we need more than a username and password. We need something else. And yes, okay, it's a pain in the backside to try to access because you've got to enter 3 to 4 different pieces of information. But fundamentally, you preserve or you mitigate the risk of unauthorized disclosure. So I think, I guess I anticipate a flow chart. And I think that flow chart is somewhat of a risk assessment, and on the back of that, then you kind of come up with your answer. And I think your answer will be different to everybody in this room because I think risk appetite kind of varies between company to company.
I guess mine was slightly more subtle. At what point will we actually say, you know what, the company will not buy you a corporate liable device. You have to pay it for yourself because we don't pay for your clothes, we don't pay for your travel. At what point do we get to the position where actually we say this is an entry-level requirement and part of the contract that you and I have as an employee is you get your own equipment?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we've made that switch on smartphone. Yeah, I know with an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, by the time they hit, I'm sure we'll have got there from a consumerization perspective. And bringing their own facilities in will have handled the security we need to handle by then, I'm sure. But I mean, just picking up on a point in terms of security and what we do. I mean, from our perspective, and we've wanted to open up more to bringing your own device, but then we've got people who are accessing to support your corporate networks. We can't risk that. You know, it's a bit like you were just referring to then. You just can't, there are some things you can't risk, and therefore you have to curtail people's choices, I think. They may end up with two, one for something else, but in certain circumstances you just need to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for your attention this morning, your participation, and with the panel. Big thank you for our 5 panelists, and the rest of the day is yours as well. But thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Okay.